Hey guys, it's the start of a new season, so this is going to be my Season 6 guide for ADC, brought to you by Nvidia. So with the introduction of Season 6, there's been a lot of championships in the meta, and I'm going to break down each ADC into 3 individual tiers. So first up, in Tier 1, Lucian. So with the introduction of Essence Reaver, Lucian has made a return to the meta due to his power with CDR. He is able to achieve 40% CDR with Lucidity Boots, Essence Reaver, and Rapid Fire Cannon. And due to his passive and dash, he actually now has a ridiculous amount of ability, as well as damage. If you're still running Thunderlords, it is actually really easy to proc Thunderlords in lane or anywhere in any skirmish just by a passive proc and a Light Slinger. The only weakness of Lucian, however, is his lack of range. When you compare him to the likes of Tristana or Jinx, his short range can be his downfall against certain team comps or champions such as Raydere or Nvidia that really punish short range ADCs. However, he also makes up for that with his self-sufficiency. And he synergizes well with many supports and is probably the most versatile ADC. So next up in the Tier 1 list, Ezreal. The blue build Ezreal has become extremely popular again. Given the fast-paced nature of the game right now, skirmishing is extremely important, and blue build Ezreal has very strong skirmishing potential, due to his high mobility as well as slows. This forces the opponent to play reactive, and when combined with tanky supports, it is actually extremely hard to pin down and win skirmishes against him. Ezreal is quite a versatile ADC, like Lucian, and synergizes well with most supports. His ability to farm long range after getting a tier allows him to not fall behind too far in lane if his supports decide to roam. For example, if you have a Shen support, it is very easy for Ezreal to keep farming and keep maintaining CS equal to the opponent, even after Shen has teleported to other lanes. So next we have Kalista. So similar to Ezreal, Kalista thrives in skirmishing and early game snowball due to her lane dominance. Her ultimate gives a lot of utility to supports and allows skirmishes to be turned around quite easily. She synergizes best with Thresh due to the lane dominance and insane mobility with the Lantern and Fate's core combo. And lastly for Tier 1, Corki. Corki's burst as well as early Trinity Force power spike gives him incredible skirmishing power like the other champions in Tier 1. His passive allows him to make incredible plays and can assert a lot of dominance over the map. Although Corki can fall off late game compared to other ADCs, games are so fast paced nowadays that it's generally an irrelevant issue, and he will continue to have a stronger impact than other ADCs for the majority of the game. As Corki is also a very versatile ADC, he pretty much lanes exceptionally well with almost all supports. Alright, now let's start talking about Tier 2 champions. So first on the list of Tier 2 champions is Miss Fortune. So Miss Fortune has slightly fallen off due to the E-nerf, but still a strong pick right now due to her strong laning as well as teamfight. The scaling on her ultimate creates an absurd amount of AoE damage and is a really easy way to win teamfights. However, one of her biggest weaknesses is a lack of escapes. She is particularly susceptible to supports like Trundle or Leona, who both have very easy ways to not only CC and pick her off, but also interrupt her ultimate in teamfights. Miss Fortune works best with peeling supports such as Morgana, Thresh or Janna. You'll most see her played with Morgana due to her black shield allowing Miss Fortune to ulti uninterrupted, and combined with Morgana's Dark Binding, allows her to unleash almost a full ultimate from long range onto the binder target. So next up on the Tier 2 list is Jinx. So Jinx is a strong hyper carry and has reasonable skirmishing power due to her traps and a super mega death rocket. She's also very quick at taking turrets and is arguably the strongest late game ADC. Like Miss Fortune, however, her lack of mobility is an issue, but it can be overcome with good peeling support such as Morgana or Janna, which you'll see her most often being played with. She also synergizes very well into Lulu comps and is also very good at taking down tanks. So lastly on the Tier 2 list is Tristana. So similar to Jinx, Tristana has a lot of strong hyper carry potential with really strong turret pushing as well. Although her skirmishing power is kind of lacking, she makes up for that with great mobility as well as great burst. She has some major weaknesses however. Many of the current Tier 1 ADCs can actually just dominate her in lane, and she really needs to stack up her explosive charge in order to actually do damage back to them. Her rocket jump can also easily be cancelled by many of the abilities of the champions in the current meta, such as Thresh Flay or Trundle Pillar. So lastly, we'll go through the Tier 3 champions. Now these champions aren't really ever played that much, but I do think they do have potential. So first up, Twitch. So Twitch has strong hyper carry potential as well as peak potential. However, his skirmishing as well as early game laning is really lackluster. Twitch basically exists to either pick people off with his stealth or do a big amount of damage with his ultimate. He also works really well with Braum due to his synergy with Braum passive and Twitch ultimate, and he also works really well with defensive support such as Morgana or Janna. So second on the list of Tier 3 champions is Kog'Maw. Now Kog'Maw has insane damage once he gets his Rage Blade and other core items. However, his lack of mobility and reliance on standing still whilst outputting his damage gives him a lot of flaws. So really, you want to think of Kog'Maw like Miss Fortune, who both have to stand still in order to output their maximum damage. As such, I would only really recommend playing him with Morgana support, and if not, at least have a Lulu in one of the solo lanes. So the last champion in the tier 3 list is Vayne. So Vayne has great dueling, great split push potential, and greater tank busting. However, she is actually extremely one-dimensional with no form of wave clear as well as very short range. This gives her a very hard time against a lot of matchups in lane as well as a lot of team comps. So because of all her issues, it is very rare that you'll see Vayne picked in competitive play, as Vayne generally has to be picked in very specific scenarios, and as ADCs are generally picked very early in drafts, you're most of the time better off just picking the tier 1 ADCs as they almost do everything that Vayne does, but to a better potential. Alright, so now let's talk about runes. So in Season 6 there hasn't actually really been any changes to runes, so ADCs will still be running attack speed quints, attack damage marked, and armor seals as a default. You can, however, choose what glyphs you can run. So you can either run attack speed glyphs or magic resist glyphs. I personally prefer to run magic resist glyphs, but some people prefer to skip the magic resist and get the extra 6% in attack speed glyphs instead. However, on Ezreal, I would actually recommend running some CDR glyphs, just enough to give you 10% CDR at level 18. Other than that, however, all ADCs are actually quite standard in the rune page they run, and they'll pretty much run the same rune page throughout any game scenario. After the buff to Ferocity in patch 6.1, it is actually standard just to go Ferocity now as the Keystone Mastery instead of Thunderlords. Apart from that, however, and some obvious talent choices, the rest is really just personal preference. Some prefer to go 18-0-12 in order to gain the extra health as well as damage reduction and resolve. I, on the other hand, actually like getting 18-12-0 because I like getting Dangerous Game as well as Merciless in the Cutting Tree. Alright, so now let's talk about items. So in Season 6, due to the item changes, there is a great amount of item diversity for ADCs to build now. However, I'm just going to touch on some of the more important items that I think you should address and take particular attention to. So let's talk about Mercurial Scimitar first. So due to the current popularity of Lissandra as well as heavy CC team comps, it is actually quite useful to build this item quite early. When compared to Bloodthirster, this item gives less lifesteal as well as a shield, but this actually grants a cleanse as well as a plus 35 magic resist. An early cleanse will allow you to play much more aggressively and output much more damage. I actually think that many ADCs often build this item way too late in their build, and I think it's definitely an underrated item that you can actually build very early in the game. So let's talk about Rapid Fire Cannon. So although it has only received minor nerfs, this is definitely still the Zeal item of choice. The only exception with Rapid Fire Cannon I think would be Kalista, who would definitely build Rune's Hurricanes instead of Rapid Fire Cannon. The extra range on the auto attack is something that you just really can't buy out of any other item, and it also really helps to get you major chunks in late game when ADCs have a lot of extra damage from multiple items. Let's just imagine a scenario where you're playing a standard ADC and just having that extra range to allow you to crit their backline, someone from their backline, and chunking them to half gives your team such a huge advantage in game. This also applies to sieging, where you can get just cheeky one hits off on the inhibitor turrets when you siege, and it just allows you to clear the game so much easier because you can just run up, hit the turret whenever your rapid fire cannon is up, and do so safely and not take any damage from it. Alright, so now let's talk about the Last Whisper items. So currently there's actually 2 Last Whisper items. So the first one is Lord Dominic's Regards, which is generally the default standard of choice due to Giant Slayer passive. So most of the time when you do want to build this item, you'll be building it against tanks who have a lot of extra bonus armor. And you know, the passive on this item is just great, plus 15% bonus physical damage against champions with greater maximum health. It's just such a great stat to have. Generally most of the time, the only time you'll be building Mortal Reminder is basically just against a Mundo or someone else with a lot of healing. Alright, so now let's talk about Infinity Edge. So compared to Season 5, in Season 6 now, it is rarely built as a first item anymore. Generally, because of its nerf, it is much more efficient to build Infinity Edge after a first crit item, such as your Essence Reaver or your Rapid Fire Cannon. Most of the time, the standard of choice is to build a BF Sword into a Rapid Fire Cannon and then finish your Infinity Edge afterwards. So thanks for checking out my guide, guys, and feel free to post questions on the written guide and I'll do my best to reply to them. You can find it at chiefsest.com/guides.